This video is sponsored by Brilliant.
Hey guys, Taufik here. In this video, let's talk about procedures in SQL. Now I'm going to start this video by explaining you what a procedure is, and then I'm going to tell you what is the purpose of using a procedure. We'll then see how to create a procedure. I'm going to explain you the syntax of creating a procedure. We'll see how to create a procedure with parameters, without parameters. We'll see how to execute a procedure, etc. Now the most important thing is that all of this explanation, the creation of this procedure, the solution to the realistic use case that I'm going to be doing in this video, I'm going to be using 4 different RDBMS. So all of these solutions I'm going to be providing, and I'm going to be writing these scripts using Oracle, MySQL, Microsoft SQL Server and PostgreSQL, because these are the 4 most popular RDBMS as of today, and I'm going to give you a solution and how to create these procedures and what procedures are with respect to all of these 4 RDBMS. So no matter which RDBMS you are using, you should hopefully benefit from this video. Now, before I can start, I would like to thank the sponsor of today's video, which is Brilliant. Now, Brilliant is an online learning platform where you can find interactive courses related to math, science, computer science, and so many others. Now, I understand that most of you guys who are watching my video are interested in moving into the field of data science or data analytics. You would want to become a data scientist or data analyst, right? Now, if you are one of them, then a couple of skills that would definitely benefit in your journey to become a data analyst or data scientist is to learn statistics and probability. Now on Brilliant, you can find some fantastic courses related to probability and statistics, and the best part about these courses, or for that matter any other courses that are available on Brilliant, is that these courses are designed to be interactive and visually appealing. So you'll not just be learning some theoretical concepts, but you will be interactively involved. So you will need to solve puzzles related to the concept that you're learning, and you will need to answer several different questions related to the concept that you're learning. And I feel it's one of the best way to learn because you will be involved interactively in your learning. Now the best part about Brilliant is that you can start learning on Brilliant for free. You can just use the link that I will be sharing in the description below to sign up for free and then start learning. Now the first 200 people who will be using my link will get a 20% off on your annual subscription. So definitely check that out, and thank you Brilliant for sponsoring this video. Okay, so let's start by understanding what is a procedure. Now procedure is a block of code which is given a name and is stored in the database. Okay, now this block of code can include SQL queries, and it can also include several different SQL commands like DML commands, DDL commands, DCL commands, TCL commands, etc. Okay, now along with these, a procedure can also include several other concepts such as collection types, cursors, loop statements, if-else statements, variables, exception handling, and much more. Now procedures can not only be used to query data from tables, but we can use procedures to build complex logics, data validations, data cleanup, and much more. And this is the reason why procedures are so powerful, because we can do a lot more in a procedure than which was possible just by using SQL queries. Okay, so this was a simple explanation of what a procedure is. Now let's see what is the purpose of using a procedure. Now procedure was introduced to give more power to SQL language. That is, procedures are generally used to do things which is not possible in SQL queries. Okay, now depending on your project requirement, you may use procedure to just have multiple queries bundled together inside a procedure, or you may build an entire software logic inside a procedure, which may include validation checks, data processing, querying of data, and much more. Now in the most simplest of terms, we use procedures when we have a requirement which is not possible to achieve just by using SQL queries. Okay, so I hope you kind of get an understanding of what a procedure is and what is the purpose of using it. Now let's see the syntax of creating a procedure. Now I just want to say that all of the syntax that I'm going to show you and all the sample procedures that I'll be creating in this video, I'm going to be using all the 4 RDBMS. So first I'll be doing it using PostgreSQL, then I will move to Oracle, then I will move to Microsoft SQL Server, and then finally I'll move to MySQL. Okay, now even if you're not working on all of these 4 RDBMS, I would highly recommend that you watch the entire video, because by watching this you will kind of get an understanding of what is the difference in creating and using of these procedures in all of these 4 RDBMS, and you will come to know the difference between these 4 RDBMS is actually not that major. Once you understand any one RDBMS, if you had to switch to some other RDBMS, it's actually pretty easy. Okay, so now let's look at the syntax to create a procedure. First I'm going to show it to you in PostgreSQL, that is I'm using the PG admin tool. Now I'm not going to spend much time here, but when I'm going to be writing the real procedure, that is when I'll explain you all the different parts of that syntax. But in general, in order to create a procedure, we just need to write something like create or replace, then you just mention procedure and then you give a procedure name. Okay, and if this procedure has parameters, you need to provide it inside this parenthesis. If there are no parameters, then still you need to provide this open and close parenthesis. This is specific to PostgreSQL. Okay, now what parameters are and what are the different types of parameters, I'm going to talk about that in a short while. Okay, so let's say for example I have a couple of parameters here. I can just say p name, it's basically the parameter name, and then I need to give the data type. Okay, so I'll just say varchar, and for the second parameter I can just separate it using a comma, and here I can just tell, let's say p age, and I'm just going to tell this is an integer. Okay, now I'm just using p as a standard. It basically stands for parameter. Okay, now after this I just need to specify what is the language of this particular procedure. Okay, now this is specific to PostgreSQL. In any of the other RDBMS you don't need to specify the language, but since in PostgreSQL supports procedure where you can write a procedure in several different programming languages, like you can write Python, you can write SQL related stuff, and you can write C related stuff, etc. It's important for PostgreSQL to understand that the procedure that you're writing is written in which language. Okay, now since most of the time we are writing a procedure to do any procedural kind of stuff, right, we generally give the language as PLPGSQL. This basically stands for procedural language PostgreSQL. Okay, now this is basically a standard you can just follow. If you are only going to be writing SQL queries inside your procedure, then you can just give a name like SQL. Okay, now after this we need to give a clause like as, and then we need to provide this double quoted dollar symbol. I'm going to tell you what this is used for in a short while. So this is a standard that you need to follow. And after this we can just provide the declare statement here. Basically this is where you need to provide all your variables. This is basically where you declare all your variables. Okay, so after your variables are declared, then you have the begin section, and basically inside this is where your procedure body comes. So this is the procedure body, that is all the logics are built here. Okay, all logics and all your query writing, all the different operations that you are planning to do inside your procedure, you basically are going to do it within your begin statement. Okay, and then you need to end your begin with this end command, and then after this you can put a semicolon, and then you just need to end the double quoted dollar symbol. Okay, now this is the basic syntax of creating a procedure in PostgreSQL. Now this dollar symbol that you see here, right, now the reason why we use it is, it's basically if you had any single quotes that you had to mention inside your procedure, then you would have to manually handle each single quote. So let's say if your procedure had hundreds of different single quotes, then for each single quotes you needed to add an escape character, or you needed to add an additional single quote. Okay, now in order to explain this better, so let's say I have a string that I want to display something like I am Taufik. Okay, now since it's a string, I always need to enclose a string within the single quote, so I'll need to enclose it like this. And let's say if I execute it like this, it's going to throw me an error. Okay, because I have a single quotes inside this string, right? Now in order to fix this, I have two ways I can do that. One way is I just add another single quotes here, and then if I execute, it's going to work, because since I added another single quotes, SQL or PostgreSQL will treat it like a single quote. Okay, the second way of doing this is I just need to add an escape character. So I need to add an E before my string, and then I can just add a backslash here, so that SQL will treat any character that comes after this backslash to be like an escape character, and it will basically print it as it is. Okay, now if I execute, you can see the output is shown how I wanted it. Okay, now this is okay if you just had one single quotes to replace, but if you had multiple single quotes within your procedure, then this would cause a problem. And that is why another way of doing that is I can remove this backslash, I can remove this E, and I can remove in fact this single quotes within the string as well, and I can just put something like double dollar here, and anything that is mentioned within the double dollar, PostgreSQL will print it as it is. Okay, now here I can have one single quote, multiple single quote, or whatever it is, whatever characters you have inside this double quote, it will treat it as it is. Okay, and that is the purpose of having this double quoted dollar symbol. Okay, I hope you get some understanding. Now this is the basic syntax of creating a procedure in PostgreSQL. Now if I go to Oracle, now I'm using SQL developer tool here, and this is the Oracle database. Now the syntax is almost similar. The major differences here is this language that you mentioned in PostgreSQL, you don't need to provide it in any other RDBMS. So I can just remove that, and I don't need to provide this dollar symbol here as well, because Oracle will handle it internally. Okay. Then other than this, everything else is same. One more difference is I don't need to specifically mention declare here, because any variable that you want to declare, you can just declare it before your begin in Oracle. Okay, and then how you specify your parameters, how you basically specify your variables, and all the language body, most of the things are pretty common between Oracle and PostgreSQL. Okay, now one thing I forgot to mention here is, why am I using create or replace? Now I can also create a procedure just by using create procedure. The reason why I'm using replace is, once I create a procedure, if I try to recreate it, then it's going to throw me an error telling that the procedure already exists. Okay, and that is where I can use a create or replace, because this will basically, if the procedure is already present, it's going to replace that existing procedure. Okay, so I hope this is clear. Now if I come to the third RDBMS, that is Microsoft SQL Server, and if I just copy that entire syntax here, the syntax of Microsoft SQL Server to create a procedure is slightly different, not much, but there are few major differences. The first difference is that all the parameters that you provide in Microsoft SQL Server, the parameter name has to start with a @ symbol. Okay, so every parameter name has to start with an @ symbol, and the same thing is for variable as well. Whatever variable that you declare, right? Generally we declare a variable telling that, let's say v underscore name, and then I need to provide a data type, let's say int, right? Something like this. Now in Oracle and PostgreSQL, we could declare a variable just like this, but when it comes to Microsoft SQL Server, every variable name has to start with @. Okay, so this is one special thing that we need to do. And the next thing is, I don't need to have this declare keyword here. I can remove that. But before I declare a variable, I need to mention declare keyword for each variable. Now either I can do this for each variable, I can have a declare keyword here, and then I specify the variable name and the data type name, or I can have a comma separated value here, then I can provide the next variable. So let's say this is something like v underscore age. I can do this as well. Okay, so if I want to have multiple variables declared, then I can just have one declare keyword here, then multiple variables just separated by a comma. This one also will work, or I can have separate declare keyword for each of the variables to declare a variable. Okay, now again, I don't need to have this language PL PGSQL, because this is specific to PostgreSQL as well. So in Microsoft SQL Server, I don't need to provide that. And also I don't need to provide this dollar symbol. So this dollar symbol and this language that was declared is only specific to PostgreSQL. Okay. Now this is the syntax of how to create a procedure in Microsoft SQL Server. Now there are a few other differences when it comes to some specific commands. We'll look at that when we will be writing procedure. Okay. But the basic syntax is just this. Now there is one major difference, and that is I cannot use replace in Microsoft SQL Server. Instead of replace, we have something called as an alter. Okay, so this create or replace will only work in Oracle and in PostgreSQL, but in Microsoft SQL Server, if I had to do the same operation, instead of replace, I need to do alter. Okay, so the functionality is the same, just two different naming. Okay, so in Oracle and PostgreSQL, we have replace, and in Microsoft SQL Server, we have alter. Okay, now let's come to MySQL. Now I'm using the MySQL workbench here, and if you are wondering which tool I'm using for Microsoft SQL Server, because I'm using the Mac OS, I'm using the Azure Data Studio. Okay, so as you can see, it's Azure Data Studio, but it's almost similar to SQL Server Management Studio. Okay, now coming to MySQL, the syntax for MySQL is, again, I don't need to provide this language. I don't need to have this dollar symbol here. Okay, and I don't need to have any @ symbol in my parameter name, or I don't need to have @ symbol in my variable name. Okay, so the syntax would be almost similar to Oracle, but there is one additional thing that we need to do here, and that is we need to specify what is the delimiter for the statement to end. What I mean by that is, when you are using any MySQL workbench or any other tool, right, for each session there will be a default delimiter which basically indicates to the database that this is the end of the statement. Okay, by default the delimiter in MySQL is semicolon. This is a default character which tells MySQL that it's the end of the statement. Okay, but the problem here is, inside our procedure, we can have multiple statements. And when I say statements, every select query is a statement, every if condition is a statement, every loop is a statement, every variable that you declare is a statement. Okay, so inside a procedure, you can have multiple statements. And what MySQL will do is, as soon as it finds a semicolon, it's going to treat it like a statement. Okay, so inside my procedure, as soon as I declare one variable and I put a semicolon, it's just going to treat this much as the entire procedure. Okay, in order to avoid this kind of things, we want to change the default delimiter to something else. And how we can do that is just by giving delimiter and some character. Okay, generally we provide something like $, and then at the end, after this end here, right, instead of giving a semicolon, I'll just provide something like $. Okay, now what MySQL will do is, as soon as it finds a $, it's going to treat that as a complete statement, and because of this, it's going to treat from the create until this statement, until this line, it's going to treat it like one whole statement, and that basically is our procedure. So basically, in order to handle multiple statements within our procedure, we just specifically change the delimiter to something. I'm just using $, you can use any other as well, and we just need to use the same delimiter at the end of our procedure. Okay, so that's major difference in the syntax when it comes to MySQL. Other than that, I think most of the things are pretty similar. One thing is, in the parameter name and in the variable name, you don't need to provide a at symbol, but when you are declaring a variable, I need to provide this declare keyword. Okay, I need to say declare, and then I need to say a variable name. Okay, and then I need to provide a data type. Okay, and in this particular case, if I'm declaring multiple variables, I need to have multiple declare keywords used. Okay, now all of this I'm going to explain in detail when we look at some real procedures. Okay, I hope the syntax you understand, and you understand the difference between the syntax in these four RDBMS. Okay, now let's go ahead and create a simple procedure in order to do one particular operation. Okay, so let's start by creating a simple procedure. Now, in order to create this simple procedure, let's say I have a requirement something like this. Now, for this, I have two different tables. I have the products table. As you can see, I have just one record, which basically has information about iPhone 13 Pro Max, its price, how many quantity is remaining, and how many quantity of these phones have been sold. Okay, and then I have the sales table, which basically has details about what are the sales that has happened. So for every sale, there is one record that is present in this table. So what was the total sales price, how many quantity were sold, etc. Right, now let's say you have been given a requirement where for every iPhone 13 Pro Max sale, we need to update the database accordingly. Okay, or modify the database accordingly. So just by looking at this, I can tell that every time there is an iPhone 13 Pro Max being sold, first I need to go into the sales table, and a new record has to get inserted into this table, because that is basically the sales order information that we need to store in the database. And secondly, we need to update the products table, basically these two columns, that is the quantity remaining and quantity sold, because as soon as one iPhone gets sold, the quantity remaining should reduce by 1 and the quantity sold should get increased by 1, right? So we need to do this kind of modification. Now, in order to modify these two tables, we cannot just be writing SQL queries, and this is where we will need to write a procedure. Okay, now this is a very simple example. I'm just trying to show you a simple procedure. So let's go ahead and create a procedure here. I'm using PostgreSQL for now. Once I do write this procedure in this database, I'm just going to move into the other database as well. Okay, so in order to create a procedure, I can just tell create or replace procedure, and I'm going to give this name like, let's say, PR by underscore products, and I don't think I need any parameter here because they've already mentioned the product name here. So I'm just going to use this name in order to query the data and then do all these modifications. Okay. Now, as part of the syntax, I need to mention the language here, and I'm just going to say PLPGSQL and the as clause, and then I need to mention the dollar quoted symbol, and here maybe I will need a variable to declare. So I'm just going to use this declare keyword here, and then I'm just going to have begin, end, and finally the $, quoted symbol to end my procedure, right? So what's the first thing that I will need to do? I need to go into the products table, and for this iPhone 13 Pro Max, I need to find the price and its product code. Why product code? Because in my sales table, I don't have the product name, but I only have the product code. So from this product name that is given to us in our query, we need to find the product code, and then based on this, we will need to insert a record into the sales table. Okay. So the very first thing that we will need to do is to query the data from the products table. So I'm just going to say select from products, right, where I think it is product name, and since we already know the product name, I'm just going to hard code it here. In realistic project, you may not be doing this, but this is just a simple example. Once I go to the next step in this video, we will be probably changing this. Okay, so for now, let's keep it like this. And I need to fetch two columns here. So from the products table, I need the product code. So I'm just going to say product code. and I need the price, okay, because this price I need to basically use it in my sales table later. Now here I have just written an SQL query which will just query the data from the database, right? In this case from the products table, and I'm fetching these two columns. Now what I want to do is I want to store these two column values into some variable, okay, because I'm going to reuse this later when I'm going to insert some data into the sales table and update the data in the products table, okay. So in order to store any value that is fetched from the select query into some variable, what I can just do is I can use the into clause here, and here I can provide a variable for each value, okay. So I'm just going to say something like v product code, okay, and then I'm just going to say v, let's say price. I'm just using this prefix here v underscore just to indicate that this is a variable, okay. Now since I'm using these two variables here, I will have to declare them in my declare section here, so I'm just going to do that. So I'm just going to say both these variable names, and here I can just tell, okay, my product code I think is a varchar, so I'm just going to say varchar of, let's say, 20, and then my price is an integer, or maybe it's a float, so I'm just going to tell that this is a float, okay. Now I think we have declared the two variables, we have assigned these variable values using our select query. What next? So when I execute this query, what will happen is for this particular iPhone, that is this particular product, I'm going to get the product code and the price, right? Now let's try to go ahead and insert the data into the sales table, because that is one of the steps that I need to do. Insert into the sales table, and I'm going to pass in all the column names here, and then I'm going to use the values, and here I'll pass in all the different values for each of these columns. So order date, I'm just going to say current date. This is basically the current system date that will get fetched using this particular function. This is specific to, I think, PostgreSQL and Oracle, okay. And then I need the product code. Now product code, I have already fetched it here in this particular variable. I got it from the above query, so I'm just going to pass it here. The next thing that I will need is quantity. Now as per this requirement, I'm just going to be selling one product at a time, so the quantity will be 1 always, okay, in this particular case. And the last thing is price. Now the sale price is always quantity into the price of the product, but in this case quantity is 1, and the sale price I have got it from this variable, that is v price. So I'm just going to open a bracket here, I'll put it this price into 1. In this case it's always going to be v price, but just for completeness, I'm just going to have this multiplied by 1, okay. If the quantity would be something else, then this price would differ, okay. So this is basically my insert statement. I'm inserting a data into the sales table. The next thing that I will need to do, or in fact the last thing that I will need to do in this particular procedure, is to update the products table. And I hope you understand why I'm updating the products table, because as soon as a product gets sold, I need to tell that the quantity remaining has reduced and the quantity sold has increased, right? So I'm just going to say update, and here I'm just going to say quantity remaining equal to, so I'm just going to copy this whole thing. I'll just open a parenthesis, and I'll just say quantity remaining -1. Okay, why am I doing -1? Because as per my current requirement, I'm just selling one product at a time, so I can just hard code it to 1 in this particular case. Okay, if you had parameters and if you are passing multiple different quantities, then you would have to use that parameter, which we will see in the next step. Okay, for now I'm just going to reduce the quantity by 1, and I have another column that is, I think, quantity sold, and this one should basically increase by 1, right? So for this I'm just going to copy this quantity sold, this one, and I'll say +1. Okay, and now I need to tell where am I updating this. Okay, currently this product only has one record, but it might have more records in the future. So it's always, when you're doing an update, always try to have a where clause, so you only update the required records, right? And for this I'm just going to say, let's say product code equal to this particular product code that I have already fetched. Okay, so I think this much is fine. Now there is one last thing that I want to do is, after this procedure is executed, I want it to display whether the product was sold or not, right? So for that, I'm just going to have a print statement. Now, if you have used Python, you know that we have something like print statement. So something similar we can do in PostgreSQL as well by using the command raise. Okay, and here I can just pass raise notice, and here I can just tell something like product sold. Okay, just like a success message, okay, something like this. Now I think that's all, and now if I just execute this entire procedure, so let's say I'm just going to execute it, and I'm getting an error. So let's try to fix it. Okay, I forgot a semicolon here. So I'm just going to execute it. But before that, I'll just remove all of this, or maybe I'll just comment out these select statements so I can run the entire procedure as it is. Okay, now I have executed it and you can see it is successful. Okay, now I have created the procedure, but that's not enough, right? Once a procedure is created, we should be able to run it. So how do we run a procedure? Now, how do we run a procedure is, what I'm just going to do is, I'm just going to open a new window here, and here let me execute the procedure. So you need to call the procedure. So just say the keyword call, and then you just provide the procedure name. Now it does not have any parameter, so you need to provide these parentheses, open and close parentheses. Okay, now when I execute this procedure, something should happen in these two tables, right? So I'm just going to copy these two tables here, and I'm just going to see what happens. So I'm just going to remove this comments and run this. Okay, first of all, you can see in the products table, if I just show you the data, you can see quantity remaining is 5 and quantity sold is 195. Okay, and in the sales table, you can see we have 3 records only. Now when I run this call procedure, you can see that I'm getting a message telling that product sold. It's a notice. Okay, so this is basically my success message that I had defined. The product has been sold. Now if I go to my products table, you can see the quantity has reduced from 5 to 4 and quantity sold has been increased from 195 to 196. Okay, and in the sales table, you can see there is one additional record loaded, this particular record. Right, so this is basically how we have written our procedure and executed the procedure, and I can execute this procedure again and again. So let's say I'll execute it again once, and I will let's say I'll execute it once more time. Okay, so I have executed it twice. So in the sales table there should be 2 new records. You can see there are 2 new records, and in the products table it should get updated twice. So from 4 it got reduced to 2 because I executed it twice, and from 196 it's increased the quantity sold to 198. Okay, I hope you understand this procedure. Now in this procedure, I just showed you how to create a procedure and how it did multiple things. So we used a select query to fetch the data from the table and then store it into a couple of variables. We then did an insert into a table, and then we did an update into a table, and finally we also printed some success message, right? So we did all of this in PostgreSQL using procedure. Okay, so I hope you are clear about this. But let's say if we had to do the same thing in Oracle, how do we do that? Okay, so what I'm just going to do is I'm just going to copy this same procedure that I created here. I'm going to go into Oracle. Okay, I'll just paste it here, and here let's say I'm going to open another window to just query the data. Okay, so I'm just going to copy these 2 tables here. Okay, I'm just going to put it here. So I have created these 2 tables in Oracle as well. In fact, I have created the same tables in all of the RDBMS. Now before I can proceed, I just want to update that every single script that I will be creating in this video, all the data sets, all the tables, all the procedures, I'm going to have them attached in my Discord channel. So if you want to download these data sets and these scripts for your practice, you can download it for free from my Discord. I'll leave the link to my Discord in the video description. Okay. Now let's see how to basically create the same procedure in Oracle. Okay, now this same procedure, if I just execute it as it is, it's not going to work because there are a few syntax difference. So first of all, I need to remove this language, and okay, I'll remove that. I need to remove this dollar symbol. Okay, and I'm just going to remove this dollar symbol. The next thing that I will need to change is in Oracle, if you do not have a parenthesis, you don't need to provide this open and close parenthesis. Okay, basically if you don't have parameters, you don't need to provide the open and close parenthesis. Okay, that's the second thing. And other than that, I don't need to mention this declare here. I can remove that because by default, whatever you mention before your begin is treated as you're declaring something. It's the declare section. Okay, and I think other than this, probably everything else should work. Okay, one other thing that will not work is this one, that is the raise notice, because in Oracle we don't have this raise command, but rather than that we have something called as RDBMS underscore output dot put underscore line. Okay, so this basically does the same thing that a print would do in Python or a raise notice would do in PostgreSQL. Okay, now I think that's all. Let me try to execute this command or this procedure, and you can see the procedure is executed successfully. Okay, so now let's see how to execute it. In order to execute it, I can just go to another tab here and I can just run the command. So previously in PostgreSQL we used the command call, but here we just need to say exec, and the procedure name I think is PR by products. So I'm just going to place it here. Okay, and I think that's all. So, but one thing before you execute this in Oracle that you need to do is, because here I have a DBMS statement here to print something, right? If I just execute, I'll not be able to see it. In order to see the output from your procedures, what we need to do is we need to just open the DBMS output window. So I just need to go to, I think not here. I think you just need to go to, I think I just need to go into Weave, and here I have something called as DBMS output. So if I click that, you'll see something like this. And here I just need to open a window for my current database, that is demo. Okay. So I need to have this DBMS output window just so that I can see what is the basically the data that is returned from my DBMS output statement from this procedure that I have given here. Okay. So now let me execute this procedure. The execution is just this single statement. So I'll just execute it. And you can see procedure is successful, and you can see I'm getting the output product sold. Okay, so now if I go into my products table, previously it was 5, now it is 4, quantity remaining, and quantity sold is 196. And in the sales table, previously there were 3 records, now the 4th record is inserted. So let's say if I execute this again, now you can see again it is product sold. If I go to the sales table, you can see now there are from 4 there are 5 records now, and in the products table from the 4 remaining, now it is reduced to 3. Okay, so the same thing that I did in PostgreSQL, I was able to do it in Oracle. And the reason why I'm showing you it in multiple different RDBMS is so you can know what is the difference in the syntax of this RDBMS. So if you are working on one RDBMS and tomorrow if you get a job where they are using some other RDBMS, you don't have to be worried. Whatever you learn, it's going to be useful in any other RDBMS. Here, we did very few changes between PostgreSQL and Oracle, and we were able to implement the same logic, right? I hope this is clear. Okay, so now let's go to Microsoft SQL Server and let's see how to do this. So I'm just going to copy these 2 tables again to Microsoft SQL Server. And okay, maybe not now. So I'll just copy this entire procedure that I have created here. Okay, so I'll just copy the procedure that I created in Oracle. I'll just paste it here and let's see what is the difference. The first difference, as you can see, you're getting this message. Create or replace will not work. We need to have alter. So I'm replacing replace keyword with alter. The next thing is every variable I told you needs to have an @ symbol at the beginning. So I'm just going to have an @ symbol in the beginning here. Then everything else is same. Okay, of course, one more thing is I need to use the declare keyword here as I mentioned previously. So we need to mention the declare keyword, then you mention the variable name, and then you mention the data type, right? And since I have multiple data variables here, I can just put a comma here and I can just include this multiple variables within my same declare statement. Okay, so that's the first part. The next change is everywhere where I was using this variable, I need to have this replaced with the @ right? So I'm just going to have this @ being prefixed in all of my variables. And okay, one more thing is in PostgreSQL and Oracle, this into command worked, but in Microsoft SQL Server, this will not work. The syntax is slightly different. We will not be able to use this into, but what we need to do is for every variable, we can just assign the value that is returned from the select statement just by using a syntax like this. So you just mention the variable name, the equal to symbol, and then your column name, right? And the same thing for your second variable as well. Okay, these are just a few syntactical differences in these 2 RDBMS, but logically or basically functionally they do the exact same thing. Okay, now similarly this current date will not work in Microsoft SQL Server. Rather than that, we can use a function called as get date. Now this get date I think also prints the timestamp. I only want to fetch the date, so I'm just going to cast this to fetch only the date value. Okay, so that's one change. And then here wherever I'm using this variable, I need to use the what is that symbol before the variable. And yeah, I'll just put this @ everywhere where I'm using this variable. So I'm using it here. I think that's all. Okay, and the last thing that I will need to do is this DBMS output will not work in Microsoft SQL Server. Rather, print works. Okay, so that's one good thing here. We don't need to write such a big DBMS output output line statement, right? We can just put print, and hopefully this should work. Now let's try to execute this and see if it's going to work or if there are any errors. No, it's working absolutely fine. So let's do one thing. I'll open another window here to execute this. So I'm just going to say, I'll connect to my database, and yeah, so I'll use my demo database, and let me get the 2 table names. So I'm just going to copy it from here. In fact, I'll copy this entire thing here. Okay, so the command to execute a procedure in Microsoft SQL Server is also exactly the same. So I'm just going to execute it, but before that, let me show you the data in products table. You can see quantity is 5 and sales table there is 3 records. Now if I execute the procedure, you can see that it is successful and it's giving a message telling that product sold, right? So if I go into my products table, now it's reduced from 5 to 4, and in the sales table it should have increased from 3 to 4 records, right? That is what you can see here. Okay, so this is what we have done in Microsoft SQL Server. Almost the same syntax, very few changes. Every variable needs to have an symbol in the beginning, and the way how you fetch data from a select query into a variable is slightly different, as you can see here, and the print can be used to display any message, right? So this is how we have done it in Microsoft SQL Server. Now let's see how to do the same thing in MySQL. Okay, so now let's go to MySQL, but before that I'm just going to copy this procedure from Oracle, because MySQL code and my Oracle code of procedure is almost similar. So I'm just going to copy from Oracle. Now one thing that you need to remember here is this create or replace does not work in MySQL, because in MySQL, if I have to basically rerun the procedure, I will need to first drop the procedure and then recreate it. Okay, so this alter will not work. Actually alter is supported, but alter cannot be used to change the body of the procedure. It can be used to change some characteristics or parameters of the procedure. Okay, in order to change the body of the procedure, we need to basically drop the procedure first. So I'll just say drop procedure if exist, then I just need to provide the procedure name here. Okay, this if exist is basically a check. If the procedure exists, only then this statement will execute, otherwise it will just skip this statement. Okay, and then I just need to tell procedure, create procedure name. Here I can pass in the open and close parenthesis if there are no parameters, and then I don't need to have this as clause in MySQL, so I'm just going to remove that. Okay, other than that, I think yeah, so when I'm declaring these variables, right, I need to use the declare keyword, and I need to declare it inside the begin section. So here I can just tell declare of this thing, and I need to do the same for both the variables. I think in MySQL we cannot declare multiple variables in a single statement, so I'm just going to do this. And then I think everything else should probably work. Okay, RDBMS output will probably not work in MySQL. Rather, what we can do is I can just use the select keyword, or basically the select clause, select, and whatever I want to print it, I can just mention it here. Okay, so I think that's all, and this should probably work. Let me execute this and see if it works. I'm getting an error. So the error is okay because I need to give a delimiter, right? So that's one important thing. So I'm just going to say delimiter, and my default delimiter is, let's say, $. Okay, and here at the end I'll just put this $. This just indicates MySQL that this is the end of the statement, so this whole thing will be treated like one statement. Okay, now if I execute this, yeah, you can see that it's working fine. Now let's try to execute the procedure. Now before I execute the procedure, let me show you the data in this tables. So I'm just going to copy it from Oracle. I'll go back to MySQL. Let's say I'll open another window here, and I'll just query the products table. Okay, so I'll just execute the products table. You can see it's having just one record. The quantity ordered is 5, and the sales table, you can see there are 3 records, right? In order to execute the procedure, first of all, let me copy the procedure name. Let me go here, and I can just use the call keyword. So I can just say call and the procedure name, open and close parenthesis, and then I can just run this. Okay, so as soon as I run it, you can see I'm getting product sold, and here also it is basically successful. Okay, so if I go back to my sales table, now it should have 4 records. As you can see, the 4th record was inserted due to this execution, and the products table should have the quantity reduced from 5 to 4. Okay, so basically you have now seen how I have created this simple procedure in all of the 4 RDBMS. Okay, I hope this is clear. Now let's go to the next step that I want to cover in this video, that is how do we create procedures which contains parameters. Okay, again I'm going to follow the same flow. I'll create first it in PostgreSQL, then I'll move to Oracle, then I'll move to Microsoft SQL Server, and then I'll move to MySQL. Okay, so now let's go to the next part of this video where I'll be creating procedures with parameters, and we'll see what can be a useful case where you might need to create a procedure with parameters and how to handle them. Okay, now in order to explain this, I have just modified the same two tables. I have just added additional records. Now you can see in the products table I have 4 different product information, and in the sales table you can see there are 10 different records. These are the sales information or the sales order details about these 4 products. Okay, now let's say you have been given a new requirement which looks something like this. They are telling for every given product and the given quantity, check if the product is available based on the required quantity, and if it is available, then modify the database tables accordingly. So what they're telling is, now you will be given the product, and also you will be given how much quantity of that product is required to be sold as per that particular sales order. And you need to first check in the database if so many products are actually available. If it is available, only then do the modification. If it is not available, then maybe return an meaningful message. Okay, so let's try to write a procedure for this, but of course I'm not going to be writing this procedure from scratch because we will be using the existing procedure that we just created earlier. Okay, so this is a procedure that we created earlier. Now what is the first thing that we need to do? As per our requirement, they have told that they will be giving the product and the quantity information. So I think there will be 2 new parameters. The first parameter is going to be, let's say, p product name. Okay, and this will be a varchar. Okay, so for every product you need to mention what is its data type, and you can also mention what type of parameter it is. Now we'll come to that in a short while, but the next parameter that we are going to have is, I think, what was that? It's a quantity, right? So it's going to be, let's say, p quantity. Okay, and this will be, let's say, an integer. Okay, so these are the 2 details that we have got. Now the very first thing that we need to do is, if I go into my products table, and you can see here, I'm not sure if you can see, I'll just zoom it. You can see that some of the products, the remaining quantity is just 5, 10, 2 or 1, right? So if someone asks for iPad Air, and if they're asking for, let's say, 5 iPad Airs, but the available, there is only 1, right? So it should basically throw us an error telling that we do not have so many iPad Airs as of now, right? So the first thing that we'll need to do is, we'll need to check for the given required data, is sufficient amount of product available in the database. Okay, so let's try to write a query for that. The first thing is, we'll keep everything as it is. The very first thing that we will do is, I'm just going to say select, okay, something like, let's say, count of 1 or count of star, whatever. Okay, and I'm just going to say from the products table, where I'm just going to say product, let's say product. So I think we are going to pass, instead of, yeah, so product name, right? So I can just tell product name equal to this parameter name. Okay, and then the quantity, right? So how do we check for the quantity? Now in the products table, I have this quantity remaining, so I can just use this column, right? So I can just tell quantity remaining. Okay, it has to be either greater or equal to the quantity that the customer may be asking as of now, right? So this parameter here, right, what this basically means is, now this by default, if I have not mentioned in or out something, right, by default these parameters are called as input parameters, meaning that these are the input that the user or from the UI or wherever this procedure is being called, right, this is the input that will be passed when the procedure is being called. Okay, and this parameter, this input parameter, we can use it anywhere in our procedure, okay, to do any calculations or any logic, right? So what I'm doing is, in my products table, for this particular product and for the given quantity, I'm checking if there is sufficient data. Now I'm matching with the given product. So let's say if the product was iPad Air, okay, and if the quantity given was 2. Now if I go to products table, you can see I have iPad Air, but the quantity here is 1. So what will happen is, this 1 is greater than or equal to 2. This will actually fail. So this will return 0, right? When it returns 0, I have to basically tell that insufficient quantity or something like that, right? So that's why I'm doing this kind of a check. Now Again, as I told you in PostgreSQL, in order to load any or basically retrieve the data from a query and to load it into a variable, we can just use the into clause. And here I'm just going to say, let's say I'm going to create a variable v count. So I'll just create it here, v underscore count, and this will be, let's say, integer. Okay, so I'm just fetching the data for the given product for the given quantity. I'm checking if the quantity that is available is greater than the required quantity passed in the input, then this will return always something greater than 0, right? So if it's returning greater than 0, then it's an indication for us that the products are available and we can proceed with the sale, right? So what I'm just going to do next is, once I have fetched this information, then I can put an if condition here. Now this if condition is similar if you have worked on SQL queries and you might have used case statement, right? Now case statement is something that we use in select queries. If we want to use the same functionality in a PLSQL block, that is inside a procedure, then we use if statement. Okay, so I can just tell if this count that we have got from our previous query, if it is greater than 0, that means there were some data returned from this table, that if that happens, only then we can update the database, right? So if it is greater than 0, then I'm just going to say then, okay, then I will do something. So what I'm going to do, we'll do it in a short while, but what I'm just going to do is, we will basically do the same thing, that is insert into sales table and update the products table, right? And then we'll tell the product sold. So I'm just going to move this to the right, okay? And here I'll just put, so this is basically everything that will happen if we are having the sufficient quantity and for that given product, right? But if not, what happens if the sufficient quantity is not met? Then I'm going to put an else part here, okay? And after else I need to put an end if. This is basically the syntax of how to use if statement. If, then you put an expression that should return either true or false. If it is true, then it will go inside the if part. If it is false, if this condition is false, then it will go to the else part. Okay, and this end if is just telling the if condition is coming to an end. Okay, now here in the else part, what I want to do is, if that query above returned 0, that means either the product itself is not present or the quantity that they asked for is exceeding the available quantity in the database. Then we want to print a notice telling that something like, let's say, insufficient quantity. Okay, something like this. So this just means that the number of quantity of item that the customer or the client has asked, in the database we do not have so much. When I say database, it basically means in the store so much is not there. So what actually happens is, when you go to a store to buy a product, they generally look into their system, right? How many products are available and everything, and basically this is what happens. From their system they kind of do a search or a submit, and internally it might call a procedure which will basically do this kind of analysis, and then it will return the result. If the product is available, then it will tell yes, or else it might tell something like insufficient product available or something like that. Okay, so we are basically trying to implement similar logic here. Okay, now this is okay. Let's once look at this if part. Here I am just fetching product code. So here I was hard coding the product name, but now I have got the product name, right? So what I'm just going to do is, I'm going to use this product name because we have more than one product in our table now, right? So for this product, I'm fetching the product code and the price, and I'm putting it into the same two variable that I have already declared here, right? And then I'm inserting data into the sales table. So order date, and then the same product code and the quantity. Now I cannot hard code the quantity as 1 because the quantity is already passed in my parameter, right? So my parameter, I have basically given name like prefixed with p underscore, so I can just put this way. Okay, so generally when I am writing a code, I try to make it very clear which is a variable and which is a parameter. So anything that starts from p underscore is a parameter, anything that starts from v underscore is a variable. Okay, of course you can have your own naming convention. This is just something that I follow to make it more neater for me. So I have put the quantity here, and then when it comes to sales price, I need to multiply the quantity with the price that was returned here, right? So this is basically what I'm inserting into the sales table. I hope this is clear. Once I have loaded the data into the sales table, I need to update the products table, right? So I need to update the product table for the given. Okay, I can either search it based on the product code or the product name. They both are should be the same, because I'm assuming that it's going to be the unique, both product name and product code will be unique in this particular case. Okay, so in this case, instead of hard coding this one, right, I just need to use the quantity, because quantity can be 1 or can be more than 1. And the same thing I need to do for quantity sold as well. Okay, so this basically I have done my update here and I have done my else here, and I think that's all. We don't need to do anything else. So I'm just going to execute this query, this procedure, and you can see there are no errors here. Now let's go ahead and execute this procedure. Now when I'm executing this procedure, since this has two parameters, it's going to be slightly different from what we did here. Okay, so previously we just did we used the call basically command, and then we put the procedure name and opened and closed the parenthesis. But here inside the parenthesis, since there are parameters for this particular procedure, I need to pass those parameters. Okay, so what I'm going to do is first is product name and then is the quantity. So I'll go and look into my products table. I have iPad Air, right? So I'm just going to pass my first product, or basically my parameter, as iPad Air. Okay, and I'll say quantity 1. Okay, I just want 1. Okay, now when I execute this, ideally what should happen is this quantity remaining here, it is 1 now. It should become 0 because one of them got sold, and this quantity sold should become from 9 to 10. Okay, and then in the sales table there are 10 records here, as you can see. Now it should increase to 11 records because there will be a new sale that will be added at the end, right? So I'll just execute this. And I have executed, and you can see I'm getting the message product sold, right? If I go to my sales table, you can see now there are the 11 records, the one record that just got added now. And in my products table, you can see the product iPad Air, now it's telling remaining quantity is 0, right? So this means if I execute this procedure again with the same data, and I'm asking for iPad Air, one iPad Air, it should basically return me that insufficient product, right? Because now there are remaining iPad Air is 0 and I'm asking for one iPad Air. Basically there should be no iPad Air to be sold, right? So let's see if that works, and I'm just going to execute this procedure, and you can see that the message that I'm getting is insufficient quantity, right? And then if I look at my products table, nothing would have changed, right? And in my sales table also nothing would have changed. Okay, and the reason why this happened was, this particular case, when I passed 1 as a quantity and product name as iPad Air, this query would return 0. Okay, because this quantity remaining for iPad Air is 0. 0 is greater than or equal to 1. This condition will fail. Hence, this query will return 0. Hence, my week count will be 0. Okay. Since my week count is 0, this condition, this expression will return false. And since this will return false, it will not go into the then part, but it will go into the else part. In my else part, I am just printing this one, insufficient quantity, and that's exactly what is happening. Okay, I hope this is clear. This is how, using parameters, we can basically make our procedure so much better, and we can implement so much complex logics with the help of parameters. Okay, now this parameter that I have shown here is input parameter. If you don't specify either in or out, then they are by default called as input parameter. Now I can also mention this and I can execute this, and you can see it will work absolutely fine. And if I run this procedure also, it's going to return the same output. Okay, now this in that I mentioned before the parameter name here, right? This is an optional input parameter, basically keyword. If it's an out parameter, then I need to specifically mention that. If it was an in parameter, then by default, whether I mention it or don't mention it, by default PostgreSQL will treat it like an input parameter. In fact, in all the RDBMS, if you don't mention what type of parameter it is, by default it is always input parameter. Okay, so I hope this is clear. Now, as always, what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this entire procedure. I'm going to the next RDBMS, that is Oracle in this case, and I'm going to basically, okay, I'll not copy from here to here. I already have the procedure written in Oracle, right? So what I'm just going to do is, okay, I'll clear all this. And here also I have modified the table to include the new data to satisfy our current condition. So I have 4 products, and in sales I have, I think, 10 sales data, right? Now how do I modify this? So I need 2 parameters. What I'm just going to do is, instead of typing everything, I'll try to do a copy paste as much as possible in order to just save time, because I hope you have already understood everything that I explained in PostgreSQL. So I don't need to mention this in clause here, in keyword here. I'm just going to remove that. So I have added my 2 parameters. I have this and my very first condition is I need to check the count, right? If the quantity is available. So for that, again, I'll just copy the same query, because the same query will work in Oracle. So I'll just move it here. I need to create this variable. So I'm just going to create this variable here, and this will be an integer. And I think everything else should be fine. Okay, so once I have got the value in my week count, I need to put my if condition here, and if this one is greater than 0, then I will do the update into my database, right? So if it is not greater than 0, that means the quantity is not getting satisfied. So many products are not available. Then I need to have an else part, and inside my else part, I just need to print a warning message telling that insufficient product, right? Or insufficient quantity. So I can just tell insufficient quantity, right? So I think that's all. We don't basically need to do any other change. Then this is how simple it is when moving from PostgreSQL to Oracle, because they are so much similar. Okay, so I'm just going to execute this. Let's see if there are any errors, and I'm just going to move this up. Okay, it looks like there are no errors. It worked absolutely fine. So now let's go ahead and execute this. You already know that in my products table I have iPad Air, but now for now, let's say I'm going to take this iPhone 13 Pro Max. Okay, so iPhone 13 Pro Max, I have 5 remaining products. Okay, and let's call this procedure now. I need to pass 2 parameters, so I'm going to pass iPhone 13 Pro Max, and I'm going to say quantity as 2. Okay, so I want to buy 2 iPhones. Now let me execute this and let's see what happens. So I executed, it is telling it is successful here, and it is telling product sold. If I go to my products table, now iPhone 13 Pro has not reduced by 2, it has only reduced by 4. And I think we missed some changes in the procedure, and that was, I think here we are still hard coding this quantity as 1. We did not use the parameter, right? So let's go back and modify our procedure here. And what we need to do is everywhere where we are hard coding, we should be using the proper parameter name, right? So this product name is what we need to pass in our query here, right? And then yeah, we need to change all of this. So current date will still work, and this quantity has to be okay. I'm just going to copy this p quantity, and even here we need to pass p quantity, and here as well, and here as well, right? And then this, I think all this should be fine. Yeah, I think now it's fine. Now let's execute the procedure again. Okay, I'm just going to clear all of this, and now I'm going back to yeah, this place. And okay, so I think the data got already changed in this table, right? Even though let's still try to use with the same table. Now you can see that iPhone 13 Pro, there are 4 remaining, right? Now let me go ahead and run this procedure. It is executed successfully, product sold. Now if I go back to my products table, you can see that now iPhone, it's reduced by 2. Okay, the reason was I passed quantity as 2, right? Now let's say what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass, let's say 3. Okay, the remaining iPhones are only 2, but I'm telling I want to buy 3 iPhones. Now if I run this, it's going to tell me, it's telling insufficient quantity. Okay, it's not throwing an error, it's just passing a warning message telling that we do not have so many products to be sold, right? So this is basically how we have implemented the same procedure in Oracle. Okay, I hope this is clear. Okay, so now let's move on to Microsoft SQL Server, and I'm going to basically do the same thing. So I have already loaded the additional data in these 2 tables. So if you see in the products table, I have the 4 products. In the sales table, I have the 10 sales details. Now let's look at the procedure that we had already written for Microsoft SQL Server. The first thing is we need to have 2 parameters, right? Let's try to add these 2 parameters. Now I'm just going to do one thing. I'm just going to copy it from here, since I don't want to type everything again. I'll just paste it here. But as I told you, in Microsoft SQL Server, every parameter and every variable has to start with an @ symbol, right? So I'm just going to add an @ symbol here, and variable already has that, and we are going to use this product name here, right? And this p quantity is something that we will use here. Wherever there is one hard coded, we will use the quantity that was passed from our input parameter, right? And yeah, so one more thing that we need to do is we need to do this check if the quantity of that product is available for this sale to happen. So I'm just going to paste it here, and as I told you in Microsoft SQL Server, this into does not work. Instead of into, I can just pass it here, and I can just tell equal to that column value from the select clause. And since it's a variable, I need to have a @ symbol in the beginning. So I'm just going to put this @ vcount equal to select count of 1. Now I can have select count of 1 or count of star, both will return the same value. And next thing what I'm going to do is I'm again going to do the same if condition check. But here the if condition syntax is slightly different from the other two RDBMS, and we'll see that. So I'm just going to say if this count is greater than 0, only then you need to basically do the update into the database, right? But in here in Microsoft SQL Server, we don't have this then clause. Okay, we don't need to use that. What we need to do is I just need to tell something like begin. Okay, so inside if I'm having more than one statement to execute, then all of those statements I need to put it inside begin and end block. Okay, so I'm just going to move everything to the right. Okay, yes, here, and let's say here I'll just tell end. Okay, and after that I can have my else part, and for else also I can have begin and end. If there are only one statement, then I don't need to have begin and end. Okay, for my if part here, what you saw at the top here, let me just, okay, this one, you can see here I have multiple statements. So this whole thing is one statement. Anything when you see it ends with a semicolon, SQL will treat it like one statement. Okay, so this is one statement, this is a second statement, this is the third statement, this is the fourth statement. Since you have multiple statements inside my if, I need to put it inside the begin and end. Okay, and then when I come to my else part, I just want to print something like insufficient quantity, right? So I'm just going to say insufficient quantity, right? So I think that's all what I want to do here, and probably this should work. Now let me execute this query or this procedure. Let's see if it is successful. Okay, I'm getting some error. Let's try to fix the error. First of all, let's go to the first one. It's telling line 6 okay, so we did not declare this vcount variable, right? So we need to declare that. So I'm just going to declare it here, and this will be an integer, right? Now let's execute the, okay, I'm getting another error, and p product name at line 9. Okay, so this p product name is our parameter, and it has an @ symbol in the beginning, right? And the same thing for quantity as well. Now let's try to execute this, and now you see it's working fine. Okay, no errors. So now let's try to execute this procedure. So let's go back to this place, and here I need to pass two parameters. So I'll look at my products table. Let's say I'm going to pass AirPods Pro. Okay, so I'll pass AirPods Pro, and I'll tell I need to maybe let's say I need 5 products. Okay, I need 5 of the AirPods Pro to be purchased. Okay, so if I execute this now, I'm getting an error. Let's see what is the error. AirPods Pro. Okay, so the error here is because I cannot put this parenthesis. So when I'm passing parameters, or basically calling a procedure or executing a procedure in Microsoft SQL Server which contain parameters, then I don't provide parentheses here. So now if I execute this, now you can see it's working absolutely fine, and you're getting insufficient quantity error. Okay, so we're getting insufficient quantity. I think something is wrong, because in the products table, I can see I have 10 AirPods Pro, and I'm just passing 5. Let's look at our procedure, what's happening here. And okay, so I think I understand what's happening, because in Microsoft SQL Server, right, in PostgreSQL and in Oracle, we can just pass this data type like varchar. We don't need to provide the character size. But in Microsoft SQL Server, if you just provide like this, what it will do is it's only going to take the very first character of that parameter. So even though I passed like AirPods Pro, it only took A, and for A it was trying to match in this table. It was not getting any record, it was passing 0, hence it was telling insufficient this one. Okay, so what I'm just going to do is I'm just going to make here, I can either pass a character like let's say 40, 50 or whatever, or I can pass something like max. Okay, and now I'm just going to execute this, and I'll go back to this part, and here I'll execute this, and now you can see that it's working fine. It's telling product is sold. If I go into my products table, you can see now from 10 it is reduced to 5, and in the sales table as well, there it should be one record. The 11th record is added. Now let's say if I execute this once again, you can see the product is sold because there were 5 remaining. But let's say if I execute this one more time, it will tell insufficient because I already executed it I'm executing it for the 3rd time, but only 10 were available, right? So I hope you understand what's happening here and you understand the concept. I hope this is clear. Okay, so now let's move on to MySQL, and here we already have the procedure that is written. So let's modify this procedure to satisfy our current requirement. So the very first thing is we need to have the 2 parameters. So what I'm just going to do is I'm going to go to Oracle because it's very similar. The syntax of MySQL is very similar to Oracle. Some of the features are borrowed from Microsoft SQL Server as well, but let's do this. So I have pulled in the two parameters, and then I have declared the variables. Okay, so the very first thing is I need to check for the count if I have sufficient quantity of that product or not. So for that, what I'll do is I'll just copy this entire select query here, and I'll just put it here, right? So this variable I need to declare, so I'm just going to say declare of this variable, and this will be an integer, right? And then what next I need to do is I just need to have an if condition. Here the if condition is very similar to what we have in Oracle. It's not like Microsoft SQL Server, so I can just tell vcount is greater than 0. Then I do all of this, right? All of these inserts and updates, and yeah, and then okay, even this cell product sold, and then I need to have an else part here, and I need to have an end if part here, and inside my else part I just need to display insufficient quantity. So I'm just going to say the same thing, that is insufficient quantity, right? And I think everything else should work. Okay, one thing that will not work is this one. We need to use this parameter now because we are passing the parameter, right? So I'm just going to say product name. I'm going to replace this parameter here, and my p quantity, I'm just going to replace it here and here and here and here, right? I think that's all. Everything else should be fine. So I'm just going to execute this. I'm getting an error. Let's try to fix the error. So let's see what the error is. Okay, so I think the error is with this current date. This current date does not work. This was a function that is supported only in Oracle and PostgreSQL. So here we can, in order to fetch the current date, I can just use the now function, and I think it will return date stamp as well. So I just want to fetch the date. So I'm just going to say as date, and I think that's all. Let me execute this now. I'm still getting an error. Let's see what's the next error. Okay, so I think the error, again, it's the same thing what we had in Microsoft SQL Server. So I just need to pass in the character size here. And now let me execute this, and you can see it's working fine. So the error is fixed here, and let's go ahead and execute this procedure. So I need to pass in the two values. So let me look at the products table, and yeah, so let me look at the products table. I have these data. Let's say I just want to purchase maybe, let's again go for this AirPods Pro. Okay, I'll just pass AirPods Pro. I'll pass in 5 as my required quantity, and I'll execute this, and I'm getting product sold. If I go to my products table, if I execute my products table, it's now telling remaining AirPods is only 5, and the sales table would definitely have one record inserted here, that is 11th record. And then let's go ahead and execute this procedure, let's say 2 more times. Okay, the first time it should work because there are still 5 products remaining, 5 AirPods remaining. So you're getting product sold, but if I execute again, it should return insufficient quantity, and exactly that's what's happening. Okay, I hope you understood this, and I hope how we have used parameters to build this kind of simple logic.